Hello and welcome to the UnEpic Epilogue. I was a little bit unsatisfied with how things ended up last time. Mostly because the video is already getting pretty long, and also you may have noticed that my wife walked in about halfway through, and it's really weird to... It's difficult to talk when nobody is there, when you know that someone is there that you're not talking to. It's a strange dynamic that makes it difficult to carry on. So I just felt that it was necessary to have a little bit of a retrospective here on the game itself. I think it's a good game. I'm not saying that it's not, but it does have some sort of glaring flaws. I mean, the one that becomes most clear as you go through it is how we have a pretty good difficulty curve at the start. Like the mines, the first area that you go to, are actually fairly difficult, and the difficulty curve starts dropping off every time you get new weapons and armor. There's a short uptick in the gardens because of the ridiculous numbers of skeletons, but when you hit the catacombs, I mean, you have ridiculous numbers of skeletons, but they can't hurt you at all. If you're playing the melee and armor approach, then you don't take any damage, and if you're playing the spellcaster approach, the spells that you have at that point just are capable of annihilating pretty much everything. So the difficulty curve sort of drops off, and then in order to make up for that, we have these really annoying types of mechanics that come in, like the slippery hands, like the jesters that turn your weapon into a toy hammer, like the invisible enemies that steal weapons. It's not like they're difficult, because there's not any real actual danger. It's just really annoying. And I think that we should be asking for more in terms of balancing out the challenge than buttering things up with stupid mechanics. And that contributes to that feeling that I felt both times through coming into the close of this game, that I'm ready for this game to be over. I'm not really having a great time anymore. That doesn't diminish the fact that the game still has a lot of merits. It has excellent control. It has a pretty good theme. I think the story is well carried out, but the ending sort of falls flat because and I might be wrong in this, but I, over the course of the game, don't really feel invested in Daniel. Yes, I'm taking control of him, but he doesn't really... He's obviously just not a real character, so I don't really empathize with him at all. So the ending just feels sort of haphazard and whatever. But that's fine. I mean, it's an indie game. There's only like 3 developers. One of them is probably not the most epic story writer. And that doesn't detract from the overall game itself. One thing I do think is missing, and I sort of hit up on this a couple of times through, is the lack of the overarching exploration. So in a Metroidvania style game, we expect to get items or abilities that increase our mobility, which enable us to revisit areas we've previously been and reach new heights, find new things. UnEpic has none of that. I think I've talked earlier about the gating mechanism in here. So, for instance, once again going back to like Super Metroid, you have certain gating mechanisms that lock you off of areas of the map that you are able to reach later on. So like once you get the high jump boots, you can reach new heights, you can get to new places, which also unlock large new areas of the map, not just small secrets. Contrast that to something like Metroid 2 Return of Samus, where the gating mechanism is the lava. Once you once you kill all the Metroids in a given area, the lava recedes from another section and you continue on to that section. That's very much like what we have in UnEpic, where you go to a new area, you fully explore it, you kill the boss, get the key, move on to the next area. The only time we have any backtracking at all is just those really obnoxious fetch quests from the pure spirits later in the game, which that's not exploration in terms of what Metroidvania leaves us thirsting for in terms of exploration. I actually saw an interesting article just a couple of days ago talking about the genius of Super Metroid, and it talks about the micro and the macro of the game. So in the micro terms, you have, I am in this room, I see I have to get across this obstacle, how do I do this? But in terms of the macro of the game, you see things on the screen that you can't reach but that pique your interest, and you say, ah, I have to remember that that is there, because at some point I'm going to get an item that will enable me to get there, and I have to come back here. Still have a little bit of gunk in my throat. Sorry about that. So the example he gives is early on in Super Metroid, you fall down a large vertical shaft, and there are these invincible enemies that go back and forth. And you're like, how do I get up that shaft? Well, later on you're going to get the ice beam, and you can freeze those enemies, and so your macro sense says, ah, now I can go back there, climb up that vertical chasm again. And UnEpic has a lot of the micro going on, because obviously you have the momentary puzzles that you have to solve as you explore the areas, but there's absolutely no macro at all. And I think that it's those macro moments that make the Metroidvania style so rewarding, is because you can sort of apply your mind and you can be like, oh yes, I remember where I can go back here. And it's that feeling of being more powerful, more versatile, that really leads to a large portion of the rewarding gameplay. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. Talked about the challenge, talked about the exploration, talked about the story. I think that this is probably the final point. I think that the method of choosing the ending is very disappointing. So you get, as you enter the tower, you encounter that guy who's like, hey, open one of these chests, that determines your ending. And I think that that's a bad way to do it. I think it would be much more effective if Daniel actually had a choice there as to what he does, and that choice determines the ending. Even if the choice that he makes has absolutely no bearing on what ending he gets, the illusion of having a choice makes that decision have meaning. Because currently it has no meaning at all. And I think that, like I said, I feel no sort of empathy for Daniel, and I think that actually sometimes having to make choices like that, like big important choices, I'm not talking about choices that matter to me in terms of being an effective player, like when I chose to read the Book of Wisdom to get 5 skill points rather than returning to the dude for 100 gold coins. That's not a character decision, that's a I want to be more powerful rather than have more useless money decision. But if you put Daniel in a situation where he just has to make an ethical decision with 3 distinct outcomes, and it's not going to be very difficult in the framework of this game, he can make an ethical decision in the framework of this game. Like, it's not a coding issue here. Having that sort of decision would be much more effective and draw you much more into the character than the current pick one of these random 3 chests. I think that is all I want to talk about. as I was saying previously, I hope you will join me next time. I think that I'm looking at doing a long play of Crystalis and as a speed run, so that'll be a relatively short project since I get through Crystalis in about an hour and a half. It'll probably take me a bit longer since I'll be playing it on an emulator with a controller that I'm not used to, and chatter over top of it is always going to slow me down. So, I hope you'll join me then. Until then, this is President Scroob, and have a fantastic day. Later.